You ended up leaving ACT UP, and obviously you were also founding director of the Treatment Action Group. But what was the point for you, I guess? What was it like that moment? And you do talk about this in the book, when you realized that this sense of community that the LGBT community had built and this fighting seemed to start to sort of dissipate, seemed to start to fade away because the antiretrovirals had come out and people sort of just moved on from it. What was that moment like for you? And again, you talk about in the book about sort of where life took you after that.
Right. Well, I mean, you've described two moments here. There's the splintering of ACT UP, which happened at the beginning of 1992. It actually, I mean, the splintering happened in 91 within ACT UP, and then there was the huge breakthrough 3 years after that with protease inhibitors, and we finally got the drugs into body we had been fighting for 10 years that could turn the illness from a death sentence into hopefully a manageable disease. That latter part, you'd think that would feel like this victorious period, but it was, it was at the end of so much misery and pain that the community had a very strange response where it kind of flipped the page immediately. It had been so mentally traumatic that as soon as we had the opportunity to focus on something else, we leaped to that. I wish it had been kind of a partial leap. I was all for looking at other things, and we just turned our back on AIDS within a year. And for those of us who had been dedicating our lives to that fight, it was a hard transition. It felt like we were being forgotten, and that the history that we had just created and just led to this extraordinary medical breakthrough. There were no victory parades, there were no memorials, there were no documentaries, there were no books. It was painful in a sense, and at the same time, we were all trying to figure out how to return to the real world, because we had been living this surreal existence of not having futures. Those of us who were positive, to all of a sudden, like, oh my God, I might live to be an old person.
You might live to be 60, Peter.
Exactly. Here I am.
But so how do you process that? I mean, you talk about drug addiction in the book, which I feel like I know you. I mean, I know you in a social. That was shocking to me. But then at the same time, I too have experienced the same. I think a lot of young gay men who are HIV positive, even now, still reach for those
escapes.
Escapes. That's the great way to put it.
Yeah. I've always had this huge faith in our community, the gay community, the queer community. We have this great ability to look our problems pretty squarely in the eye and be out about them, to not, I've always been against the, the finger-wagging queers who are like, don't put our excesses in the gay pride parade. Don't put the drag queens up front. Don't put the go-go boys on the floats. It's all so embarrassing. The straight world will recoil. That shit. I love the fact that we say that shit, and we are out, and along with our issues, we are out, and we confront them full on. I focus my addiction chapter far less on my personal gory story, like all of our gory stories of addiction, on the highs and lows of what I went through, and more on how the community came together to start looking at this and seeing how it could tackle it.
Tackle it, you did. I don't know where we are at with this COVID-19 pandemic. A year ago the vaccines were out and there was all this hope, and I think most of us in America thought by this time now we'd be seeing the back of it. But we've got a whole population of stupid people. When you talk to young activists, and in your own activism, especially around COVID, how do you take on this, what seems to me, stupidity of people going, I'm not going to get vaccinated, I'm not going to wear a mask, yet they've been vaccinated against measles and rubella and everything else, and my child is not going to get this. What's your advice? I mean, how do you talk to people like that? Because, I'm just done. I've shut up about it. And that I think is the wrong approach.
Yeah, these are different times. All activism has gotten much, much harder because of the breakdown of the anti-factual reality that we're living in now, where upwards of 30%, sometimes higher, people in the US and many people around the world now live a cultish existence of conspiracy theories and anti-factual lives. That didn't exist when ACT UP did it work, or the beginnings of it were brewing, but it wasn't full-fledged like it is now. And we're seeing it affect all issues. Obviously, the first was in the 90s with the rise of global warming conspiracies, which has prevented the U.S. and other countries from taking action for the first crucial years and decades now. We are in the fight of our lives, both in this country and for the planet, to see how to reverse that. Personally, I think there's a narrow window of trying to maintain political control. From a strategic standpoint, that means we all have to get our hands quite dirty and be quite strategic on winning elections. That ain't, that's not an idealistic form of activism. That's certainly not a feel-good form of activism, but that is the job in front of us. And until we win elections and maintain our democracies and start racking up a few years of showing the world that government works, because we've been in an anti-government environment since Reagan, then you might begin to slowly turn the tide against this epistemology breakdown that we've had. It's very depressing.
The Biden-Harris administration, marked World AIDS Day by, and like everyone does, renewing their commitments to end HIV/AIDS epidemic by 2030. We all, renew our commitment. But how realistic do you think it is by 2030 for us to have knocked this thing finally once and for all on the head?
It's not impossible. Therefore, we should be setting those goals. Actually, on the research front, we're beginning to see some exciting things on both cure, and we've had some major disappointments once again on the vaccine front on stage 3 trials. But stuff entering the pipeline on the vaccine effort, especially like mRNA for HIV, are reasons for optimism. I'm still pretty convinced by 2030 that we might have decent vaccines and at least what we call a functional cure, where the same vaccine might help a person with HIV self-control the HIV that remains in their body without the need for ongoing therapy. I've been saying 2030 for many years now, actually since 2010, I think. And I haven't been knocked off. There's nothing, in fact, in the most recent last 2 years, I'm becoming more convinced that 2030 is possible, that I will live to see these breakthroughs.
I hope so. Last question, Peter, because I've taken enough of your time. What do you hope people take away from reading your memoir and this fantastic book? What do you hope they think?
I just hope they see some of themselves in this and get inspired by it. When I found out, got handed this death sentence at the age of 24 out of the blue, I really wasn't expecting. I really didn't think I was at risk for HIV, which was totally stupid. It just showed how naive I was. I was this closeted bond trader on Wall Street. Within a year and a half, this movement got born, and I got wrapped up into it, and it was gorgeous and beautiful, and I swept up in it. and it changed me totally. It forged me. And none of us could have done anything alone. It was really about people power. It was really about community power. It was people coming together, doing extraordinary activism together. If going from 0 to 100 in a 2 years under fire like that is possible, I hope people see their own start. Realize they might think I'm at 0, but then they might say, but I want to get further along, and they can see how that's possible.
Peter Staley, thank you so much.
Thank you, Carl.